Tonight, another blow. Suspension on perpetual treasuries from doing business as a primary dealer further extended. Wading in, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe instructs the central bank to follow through on the recommendations of the bond inquiry report. Toothless tiger. The Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka says officials don't follow the law, also raises various other concerns. Due protocol. The Election Commissioner lays out procedures for the local government polls. And in international headlines, the olive branch. North Korea agrees to have talks with the South next week. Good evening and welcome to First at 9 on Other Derana 24/7. I'm Mahesh Johnny. We want to welcome all our viewers joining us across Sri Lanka and around the world and also live on Facebook. Let's begin tonight with our lead story. A meeting took place this afternoon at Temple Trees to determine the next steps in executing recommendations made in the bond inquiry report. The meeting was held under the patronage of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Issuing a communique, the Prime Minister's office said that the Prime Minister has given directions to the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, to commence executing the recommendations as soon as the complete report of the Commission is issued. The Governor has informed that the Central Bank is in the process of selecting a local or foreign company to conduct the forensic audit examination as recommended by the Commission. The necessity of safeguarding all the documentation of the Central Bank has also been discussed during the meeting, since the Commission has recommended to carry out an investigation on the fraudulent activities that took place between 2008 to 2015. The communique goes on to say that a committee inclusive of the Governor of the Central Bank, Secretary to the Treasury and the Secretary to the Ministry of Law and Order is vested with the responsibility towards this end. Meanwhile, many politicians expressed various views regarding the final report of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, which probed the central bank bond issuance.
The Minister of Finance split into two for the first time since 1973, and if anyone wants to know why it happened, this is the point to start. It was the need of some politicians to reappoint the same central bank governor following the end of tenure. This is posing serious problems to the economy, attracting foreign investment and the credibility of the central bank. If a new law is required to recover this, no great deal of time needs to be spent on it, as even UNP politicians have said they are in support of it. It's neither the President nor the SLFP who brought in the former central bank governor or protected him. The country has to decide who is culpable. The former finance minister says the central bank wasn't under him. A certain group wanted to protect the former governor. We, the joint opposition, expect to hold discussions with party leaders and bring a no-confidence motion against the Prime Minister. This is a robbery which destroys the self-respect of UNP members. Ravi Karunanayake cannot be made scapegoat and wash the hands of the matter, or by saying the Prime Minister isn't accused by the Commission. The Prime Minister is in fact the brains behind this. There's a cadre of ministers responsible. What is the action against Malik Samaravikrama, Ravi Karunanayake and Kabir Hashim? Can the President continue to keep the Prime Minister in his chair? If the President is capable of taking direct decisions, he should remove all the ministers implicated in this, including the Premier, from their positions. The President has a special responsibility since all these ministers are his. All of them have made a considerable effort to meet and discuss with the accused, similar to that of a High Court judge deliberating a murder, meeting the accused at night. The President has to decide whether to accept such conduct. The central bank theft was perpetrated by Ranil and the government, and they were protected by President Maithripala Sirisena. I will tell you this today, no politician will face consequences. Instead, some state officials will be removed. One of the chief accused, Ravi Karunanayake, says the central bank wasn't under him. During his tenure, he misused power to a great extent, and he cannot banks which weren't even under him, while facilitating fraudsters. It is our view that the UNP should leave the government since this theft happened within a UNP government. Not a single thief is caught. Now the president is talking of a sword and how he would take action irrespective of affiliations. Do you think action will be taken now? This is an attempt to grab votes. The people will split into two factions, and it won't be on race or caste. It will be on whether to give the Pradesh Sabha to thieves or not. If the answer is the thieves, there is a competition between GL Pires and Ranil Wickremesinghe. If not, there's only one decision left, and that is to side with President Maithripala Sirisena, who caught the thieves. It was members of the UNP who gave the power to the president. UNP faced various challenges, and not even the bond issue can derail the UNP. There is no issue. The bond inquiry report is not a court verdict, but a collective of information. It is sent to the Attorney General. If someone has done wrong, we are prepared to face it.
The Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has extended the suspension of Perpetual Treasuries Limited from carrying on the business and activities of a primary dealer for a period of 6 months. Issuing a communique, the Central Bank said that the suspension is extended in order to continue the investigations being conducted. The Monetary Board has taken the decision acting in terms of the regulations made under the Registered Stock and Securities Ordinance and the Local Treasury Bills Ordinance. In one of our headline stories, the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka yesterday called a media briefing in order to raise concerns over several issues ranging from forged human rights organizations to the violation of human rights when admitting children to schools. Addressing the briefing, Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Dr. Deepika Udagama, said that steps need to be taken to ensure that human rights in Sri Lanka gets more prominence by all quarters of the society.
Addressing the gathering yesterday, the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Dr. Deepika Udagama, raised concerns about forged organizations that are canvassing funds for human rights issues.
These bogus organizations, they use the term human rights, either center or organization or institute or institution, etc. They charge money, they collect money. For example, one organization organized a so-called peace march from the north of the country to the south and, collected money. Many thought that it was the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. We have now complained to the police in certain instances, and also we have written to the Constitutional Council and the ministry which is in charge of the NGO registration secretariat. And then on disappearances in the north, people being told that the Human Rights Commission will issue letters recognizing that so and so's child is disappeared and has sometimes charged up to 2 lakhs. So those matters have been taken to the police. They are under investigation, but the final conclusion of those investigations have not been communicated to the Human Rights Commission. People get a very wrong impression of independent institutions. We do not charge for the complaints procedure. We do not collect money for anything. We do not have campaigns.
Dr. Udagama also highlighted on issues received by the Commission with regard to violations of human rights.
Two major points when we look at the overall picture presented by these complaints. One is that there are many complaints about issues relating to personal liberty, in other words, custodial violations, harassment mainly by the police. But in the north, we also get a lot of complaints about, at least we've received some complaints about alleged harassment by who people think are intelligence officers, either police intelligence or military intelligence. So that is also a factor. We are in conversation, we are continuing to have discussions with the police in this regard, because it is very clear that strong police reforms are needed for this. This is not to completely condemn the police, not at all. We do see very good, honorable police officers. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, we cannot ignore these developments. Arbitrary arrests and detention, 298.
Touching on concerns pertaining to schools, Dr. Udagama specifically highlighted action taken against students.
So this is a new trend actually that we are seeing. It has been there for a long time, but now we are seeing sort of an increase, a gradual increase in the number of complaints we get about the violent manner in which disciplinary action sometimes is taken against students. Now, this does not mean that the Human Rights Commission promotes indiscipline in schools. Not at all. And we have now requested from the Ministry of Education that we be able to meet principals of all national schools. We don't think that we can produce the type of democratic citizens through this education system that is solely focused on exams. This is an obsession, exam obsession. So we can't blame the students, obviously. The system has to be corrected. So it requires actually curriculum revisions and a whole lot of other changes that need to take place. We hope that to release the report of the Education Policy Subcommittee this year, which will recommend quite radical reforms. This is something we take very seriously, and I must say very frankly, even this 25% that is reserved for the all boys, all girls category, from a human rights point of view, is very problematic. Very, very problematic. Now, this will not meet with the approval of larger society for sure, but from a human rights point of view, all these quotas are very problematic unless it's a quota for children, disabled children, or from marginalized communities. Otherwise, you just cannot from a human rights point of view. But as I pointed out, we have a subcommittee on education policy and human rights. We hope to release the report this year, and all these issues will be addressed. Human rights and democracy are two sides of the same coin. And so one of the major problems for human rights protection in the country is patronage politics. Patronage politics means people are denied equality. So when we see the school admissions, it also then, is about preferences given to a certain class. Then I think we can take a position on that because it's a very specific instance. We do have to take very strong measures if we have to correct the system. And another thing is about the resource allocation to schools. Recommendations are concerned, there is no provision currently where you can get those implemented through the courts. Well, we are a toothless tiger because our government officials do not follow the law.
Chairman of the Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapriya, today laid down the protocol for conduct and other related matters pertaining to a looming local government election. At a media briefing held at the Election Secretariat in Rajagiriya, Deshapriya also revealed that there are 70,000 people in the country who share the same identity card number with their spouses.
There is only one type of propaganda poster that can be put up in public spaces. That is for propaganda meetings to be held at public places with the names of the speakers and the venue. They can use unique taglines if they have. If they use pictures of their leaders or former leaders, police have the power to arrest the relevant organisers. Putting up cutouts in election offices is not a right they have, and they must take them down before the 31st of January. Some contestants insert small pictures of themselves and include larger pictures of their spouses who are in power, saying, "When I win, he will come to power." Yet, for this election, that cannot be done. Those who don't have their names in the list cannot come to power. Other candidates can only be appointed if women fail to win. If a woman who wins resigns, a male candidate will not be appointed. It's an issue if religious events being held for candidates using loudspeakers is an issue. In such instances, not only the civil rights of the candidate, but also the relevant clergy will be suspended for 7 years. In our list, there are around 70,000 voters who share the same identity card number with their spouses. In other words, there are 35,000 couples who use one identity card. We send them a letter requesting that they change their identity card numbers. The Election Commission requests that the contestants make their asset declarations before the 20th of January. If not, we will have to remove the cutouts of their portraits put up at their residences.
In other local stories we have for you tonight, Western Provincial Councillor of JVP Asoka Ranwala was arrested for allegedly threatening the officer in charge of the Crimes Division at the Sapukaskantha Police last night. However, the Western Provincial Councillor alleged that he was assaulted by the Sapukaskantha Crimes OIC when he was questioned over a youth in the area. Asoka Ranwala made this statement to media while he was being admitted to the Ragama Teaching Hospital by the Sapukaskantha Police. Speaking to Other Derana, General Secretary of the Ceylon Teachers Services Union, Mahinda Jayasinghe, said that he learned that Ashoka Ranwala was inhumanely assaulted by Sapukaskantha Police after the conclusion of a JVP rally held in Kiribathgoda last evening. He also requested the Inspector General of Police to hold an impartial inquiry into this matter. Colombo Fort's Magistrate Court issued an open warrant today to arrest the former Sri Lankan ambassador to the United States, Jalia Wickramasuriya. The warrant is issued for not appearing before the court after going abroad for medical treatment.
Former Sri Lankan ambassador to the United States, Jalia Wickramasuriya, was arrested by the Financial Crimes Investigations Division in November last year on charges of misappropriating funds amounting to $332,000 when refurbishing the Sri Lankan embassy in Washington, D.C. while in office. He was subsequently remanded by the court until he was granted bail in March this year. In July, he was permitted to travel abroad for medical treatment by the Fort Magistrates Court, which lifted the travel ban following a request made by a counsel who appeared on behalf of Wickramasuriya. An open warrant was however issued today as the accused failed to appear before court on the given date after travelling abroad for 2 months.
Minister of Megapolis and Western Development, PATALI CHAMPIKA RANAWAKA, commends the contribution made by the private sector to the country's education system. Addressing a function in Colombo yesterday, the minister acknowledged the role played by private sector education in democratizing country's education, adding that it is the responsibility of the government to make private education more systematic.
Although the country's private sector education is unsystematic, it has given rise to a considerable democratic revolution. Recent advanced level examination results reveal that children from areas such as Matara, Jaffna and Ratnapura have shown flying colours. Such levels, however, were not attained by prominent schools in Colombo. It is of great significance, and the schools and the Ministry of Education alone cannot claim credit for it. It has to be said that a considerable input from private schools and private teachers have been made towards this. More than the capability of the Ministry of Education, it is because of private teachers who prepped students for examinations that access to good teachers who were limited to Colombo became democratized. That said, however, private education, including schools and universities, are unsystematic at present, and it is the responsibility of the government to bring the sector to a proper standard.
Visiting Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs Taro says that the government of Japan is ready to provide its fullest support for the development and reconciliation process of Sri Lanka. He said this when he met President Maithripala Sirisena at the Presidential Secretariat today. Meanwhile, Japanese Foreign Minister also called on Prime Minister Ranil Wickramasinghe this evening.
Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs Taro Kono arrived at Sri Lanka for an official tour at around 9 last night. The group of delegation was welcomed by the State Minister of Foreign Affairs Vasantha Senanayake. This is the first time in 15 years that a Japanese foreign minister is visiting on a state tour to Sri Lanka. When the Japanese foreign minister called on President Maithripala Sirisena, he asserted that business relations between the two countries is at a peak and spoke on possible plans on sending more investors to Sri Lanka to look into further opportunities. At the meeting, President Maithripala Sirisena commended the assistance Japan provides Sri Lanka in developing infrastructure facilities in the fields of education, health, agriculture and cultural affairs. He also thanked Japanese Foreign Minister for the assistance provided when he participated at the G7 summit in Japan and during the Civil War. Meanwhile, calling on Prime Minister Ranil Wickramasinghe, the Japanese Foreign Minister said that the Japanese assistance will be given to Sri Lanka to fulfill its goal of becoming an economic hub of the Indian Ocean. Prime Minister Ranil Wickramasinghe pointed out that the Japanese experiences and investment assistance is important in developing Colombo and Trincomalee ports, widening Kandy City and developing it, constructing the Central Highway and expanding the Katunayaka Airport. During the meeting, it was revealed that an agreement to build a floating steam power plant built with the funds from the Japanese government will be inked by the third week of this month.
The Derana Media Network was felicitated with the Sama Shri Tilina Puja Award by the new United Organization, a human rights organization in Sri Lanka. With that story, let's now take a look at other stories making news across Sri Lanka.
The Derana Media Network was recognized with the Sama Shri Tilina Puja for its efforts in developing temples, providing equipment for school children and upgrading facilities at schools. A Sri Lankan passenger was arrested at the Bandaranaike International Airport with undeclared gold jewellery worth nearly 4.5 million rupees concealed in his luggage. The 49-year-old resident of Kalmune with over 800 grams of gold jewellery had arrived from Mecca in Saudi Arabia. A body of a female was recovered from a house in Kahatagala Havatana in Vagama, Bibila. Although the 52-year-old deceased had resided with her mother and sister, they were unaware of her death. The body was found following a search carried out by villagers after being notified of a foul odor of a decomposed body. A carcass of a tusker suspected to be of the Kallaru tusker has been discovered from the Pookulama village located near the Vilpattu National Park. A pair of tusks discovered recently in Tantirimale while being readied for sale at 5 million rupees was suspected to be of the Kallaru tusker. The explosive, commonly known as Hakkapatas, claimed the lives of 7 elephants in the Horopatana area last year. According to wildlife officials, the explosive is inserted in vegetables by farmers in order to protect their paddy fields from these giants. They say that the number of elephant deaths recorded last year due to Hakkapatas is less compared to 2016.
You are watching Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's move on to international news. North and South Korea will hold official talks next week for the first time in more than 2 years after Pyongyang accepted Seoul's offer for dialogue just hours after the United States and South Korea delayed a joint military exercise. The South's Unification Ministry said today that North Korea has sent its consent for the talks to be held on the 9th of January.
The last time the two Koreas engaged in official talks was in December 2015. The talks will be held at the border truce village of Panmunjom, and officials from both sides are expected to discuss the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and the improvement of inter-Korean relations. With the officials to represent the two Koreas yet to be confirmed, North Korea asked for further negotiations regarding the meeting to be carried out via documented exchanges. Meanwhile, North Korea held a mass rally yesterday in Pyeongchang, pledging to carry out leader Kim Jong-un's New Year agenda. However, Kim Jong-un was not seen at the rally.
Let's get more insight into this story and more. For that, let's cross over to Anuradha Herath, First at Nine's Chief International Affairs Analyst. She joins me now from the newsroom. Anuradha, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Well, this is indeed a considerable development in the dispute between the two Koreas. Would this actually lead towards a permanent settlement?
My immediate sense is probably not. We've seen this before, as you said in your report. They tried this again, tried this 2 years ago, and it wasn't successful. One of the key reasons that this has come about this time is actually the Winter Olympics that is set to take place in South Korea, and North Korea had made some indications that they'd like to send a delegation to the Olympics, which is sort of what got this started. So the sense is among experts is that when the talks do take place, it'll probably revolve around the logistics of, sending a possible delegation to the Olympics. But then when you get to the hardline issues, it will probably break down again, because North Korea is very adamant in continuing its nuclear program, obviously, and South Korea is adamant about trying to get them to stop.
Indeed. Now, the other thing that is alarming in the region is the possibility of a nuclear war. Now, North Korea continues to test ballistic missiles and put the entire region on alert. Now, the interesting thing is about China. They seem to be very concerned about this matter at this moment. And in the past, they've remained very calm. But things have changed. What did?
What has changed is the relationship between the two countries. For years, ever since really the Korean War, if you recall, they've been very supportive of each other. They signed a treaty in 1961 vowing to support each other amidst any potential aggression. But indications are, Chinese president had publicly stated that he is not adhering to that treaty, and there are reports that he hasn't even spoken with the North Korean leader. Even the ambassador to North Korea, Chinese ambassador to North Korea, has not, these are reports, unconfirmed, but has not spoken to the North Korean leader. And so it's obvious that it's no longer a friendly relationship as it was previously, and I think that's really what the change is.
Now, finally, I want to bring your attention to the wars of the buttons. Trump, the US President Donald Trump, he says that he has a big one and it's more powerful. That is in response to the leader of North Korea saying that he has a nuclear button at his desk. Now, rhetoric like this seems to be hurting Trump at a time when he seems to be achieving so much back home, like the tax cuts.
I mean, the first indication for us is to smile when you hear something like that, but it is really a serious issue, and I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen a world leader make comments like that. But the irony here, a little bit, if you think about it, is when Kim Jong-un came into power after his father, we were talking about how irrational his, thoughts and ideas and statements were, and we were almost on the verge of sort of making fun of it, saying we can't believe this, he's worse than his father. But now we've got the American leader saying these types of irrational types of comments, and it obviously does have an impact. But I think what we sort of need to remember as well is all these three players, the US, China, and North Korea, I don't think they really want to get into a fully blown war, because that will be devastating.
Indeed, things have definitely changed during the time that it has been taking place. Well, that's Anuradha Herath, First at Nine's Chief International Affairs Analyst. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let's move on to business news now. Let's take you to the stock market now. Colombo stocks wrapped the week's operation in positive territory, with the all-share index gaining 55.07 to close at 6,514.73, while the S&P SL 20 index gained 38.67 to close at 3,783.93. Market turnover advanced to about 1.4 billion rupees, driven by crossings accounting for 37% of total market turnover. Foreign investors, in the meantime, were net buyers with an inflow of 357 million rupees. Well, for a detailed picture of how the markets performed during the week, here is Raghuram Ramakrishnan with a review.
During the week, ASPI gained 2.3%, mainly due to price gains in blue chip counters such as John Keel's Holdings, Ceylon Tobacco Company and Dialog Asiata. Meanwhile, S&P SL20 increased by 3.1% for the week. The average daily turnover was up from last week to 922 million rupees. Banks, finance and insurance sector recorded the highest sector turnover during the week, whilst the second highest was seen in the diversified sector. Foreigners remained active during the week, where foreign purchasers accounted for 70% of the total weekly turnover. A significant amount of foreign purchasers was seen in John Keel's Holdings and Hatton National Bank. A net foreign inflow of 2 billion rupees was recorded for the week. Out of the weekly turnover, block trades accounted for 58%, which was higher than last week.
Sri Lanka's award-winning news channel, Derana 24/7.
A bit of cricket on sports. Australia got themselves to a strong position on the second day of the fifth and last Ashes Test, ending the day on 193 runs for the loss of just 2 wickets. The home side trails England's first inning total of 346 by a further 153 runs.
Resuming the day on 233 for 5, England could only add a further 113 runs to the total. David Malan, who was on a half-century, was the first to go for 62. Then on, England's much-criticised tail wagged and Moeen Ali, Tom Curran and Stuart Broad got to 30s, but none managed to kick on. With the tail end being peppered with pace and bounce, a calamitous run-out brought the innings to an end with 346 runs on the board. Impressive Aussie paceman Pat Cummins grabbed 2 of the 3 wickets to fall on the day and finished with figures of 4 wickets for 80 runs. Australia's reply got off to a disastrous start, with Broad rattling the stumps of opener Cameron Bancroft for naught. Any hope of the same for the rest of the batting lineup never materialised, as David Warner posted a breezy 56 before he caught a good delivery from James Anderson following a partnership of 85 runs with skipper Stephen Smith. With his departure, Usman Khawaja and quite possibly the man of the series, Smith, put on an unbeaten stand of 107 runs, with Khawaja ending the day on 91 with Smith on 44. Tomorrow is the third day of the match and the home side will start the day 153 runs behind England's tally.
You are watching Sri Lanka's premier news channel, Derana 24/7.
Well, time to take a look at your weather. Dry weather with colder nights and morning can be expected over most parts of the island in the next 24 hours. Ground frost can be expected at some places in the Nuwara district during the next few days and in the early hours of the morning. Mainly fair weather will continue over most parts of the island. Now, here's a look at your city-by-city forecast.
You are watching Sri Lanka's #1 news channel, Derana 24/7.
Well, it is Friday, so as usual, let's end the working week on a high note with our good story of the week. Well, tonight's story is about a little girl from Brazil who chose her brother, who is stricken with cerebral palsy, as her dance partner at the year-end ceremony of her school, making him a partner of all the festivities. She was delighted to share the moment with him and brought a tear to the eyes of those looking on. Such a sweet thing. Well, that is a part of your world tonight right here on Derana 24/7. Indiviri Amartha will return tomorrow first at 9. Be sure to join her then. And also, when you have the time, make sure you connect with us on Facebook at facebook.com/first@9 or on Twitter at twitter.com/first@9. Enjoy the weekend. Good night.